Chapter 6 Hershey's Kisses and Lockjaw. I walked into the hallway. My path was lit up with sunshine and happiness and bright flowers. To make it even more perfect, Clarice was sitting on the floor right under the picture of President Roosevelt with tears streaming out of her eyes. She jumped up. "Oh, Deza, please, I'm really, really sorry. I acted that way. I was so surprised and happy, and I lost my mind for a minute. Will you ever forgive me?" "You don't even need to ask." We hooked arms and started our walk home. "What did Mrs. Needham tell you? She wouldn't change your grade, would she?" Clarice put her hand to my ear. "Don't tell anyone, but I have an uncle in Indianapolis who got tried for murder. He got away with it, Deza. If I write to him, he can give us a plan for rubbing Mrs. Needham out without getting caught." "No, Clarice. Second place was to teach me a lesson. I won't even mind if Mrs. Needham gives me a B plus or two. I'm sure your essay was much better." Clarice stopped and looked at me. "Deza Malone, thank you very much." I pulled her along, anxious to get home and talk to Mother. "What's in the bag?" I wanted so much to tell Clarice everything and show her the beautiful shoes, but I had promised. "Oh, this. It's just some papers and a few things that, thank goodness." We were walking past Heimluch's. Clarice pointed at the window and said, "That dress is so horrible, I wouldn't even wear it to a stoning of Dolly Peaches." Maybe Mother would let me give Clarice my other dress, the one I wear to church. It has a lot less patches than the one Clarice wears now. We reached Clarice's house and hugged. She said, "Only one more day, Deza. I'm really going to miss school and Mrs. Needham, even if she gave you the wrong grade." I had to tell Clarice. "Mrs. Needham said she's going to tutor us after school and on weekends next year." Clarice said, "Really?" I said, "Really." Clarice walked up on the porch and turned around to wave at the same time. We both held up two fingers and made our special signs. Still, two girls sharing one heart. I ran the rest of the way home. "Mother, Mother!" "Hey, sis, you forgot it's the end of the month?" I had forgotten. Mother would be waiting in line for the food they gave away at the mission. Jimmy was sitting on the couch with a pencil and a couple of pieces of paper. "What are you doing?" "This, just drawing the fight and making plans." Jimmy's plans were mostly about murdering whoever was the latest bully in his life. It's lucky he's kind of lazy. If he followed through with any of these plans, I'd get to wear the new dress and shoes to watch Jimmy take the long walk to Old Sparky. I stuck out my hand. "Let me see." As good a singer as Jimmy is, let's just say, he's just as bad a picture drawer. The first page showed a man in shorts with boxing gloves. He had Ms. Germ written across his chest. By his feet was a head that was frowning. Next to him was a man with Joe written across his chest. He had a huge smile and was holding his arms above his head. He was wearing boxing gloves and was waving a flag that was probably an American flag, even though it only had 2 stars and 3 stripes. Jimmy said, "See, that's what's going to happen on the 17th. Joe Lewis is going to knock Max Smelling's head off." I rolled my eyes. If I heard one more thing about that ridiculous, worthless fight, I'd lose my mind. I looked at the other drawing. This plan was just as horrible. The picture showed 3 people and what looked like the biggest Hershey kiss in the world. For some reason, there was a big cloud raining down on the kiss. The first person in the plan was a boy with his arms spread wide. I knew it was Jimmy. In his pictures, he always draws himself as big and bumpy with muscles. In his hand was a box of something that had Nittles written across the front of it. He'd drawn lines from the Nittles that pointed at the giant Hershey kiss. On the other side of the Hershey's kiss was a boy who was standing with his arms spread. This had to be Dolly Peaches because of all the teeth the boy had. The third person in the plan was me. I was holding something with "Big Book" written on it and had a gigantic toe. I'm usually the only one who can figure out what Jimmy's plans mean, but not this one. I said, "Okay, it's you, Dolly Peaches, and me, right?" "Yeah." "And Dolly's standing up, but he's dead, right?" "Oh, yeah, that's a picture of the exact second Dolly starts pushing up daisies." I pointed at the huge Hershey kiss. Why is this chocolate here? Nah, sis, that ain't chocolate. That's a haystack. He said it like I was the one who was crazy. And why is my toe so... A light went on in my head. A epiphany. When I was littler, I used to have accidents all the time. Jimmy joked that even if it hadn't snowed for years, I'd find something as small as a puddle of frozen bird pee and would slip on it and sprain my ankle. And my feet were like magnets for every rusty nail, broken bottle, or jaggedy tin can lid in Gary. I had been 6 years old and remember father holding my ankle tight. Mother's reading specs were on his eyes, and a straight pin was between her thumb and pointy finger. Jimmy was squeezing my hand and had given me a fold up wash rag to bite down on. He'd seen that in a Western movie when someone was digging a bullet out of a white cowboy who got plugged by an Indian. I didn't have a bullet in me, just another splinter. Father said, Deza Malone, looks to me like you're doing something that only a few of the smartest professors at a few of the best colleges have ever done. A little pinch of pain made me squinch my eyes shut. Sorry, Father said. That's right. You're going to be responsible for a change in the King's English. Another archaic saying is doomed to bite the dust due to Daddy's darling daughter, Deza. He dug the straight pin around in my foot to make the sliver show its head so he could tweezer it out. I pulled out the wash rag for a second and said, How could I change the language? Well, he said, grabbing the tip of the splinter with the tweezers, because of you, that old saying that something is as hard to find as a needle in a haystack won't be used anymore. It will become moot. Folks will learn if they want to find that needle, all they need to do is have you stand within 30 feet of the haystack. That needle will come flying out of the hay as you like it, was an arrow shot out of an itsy bitsy bow, and your rusty old foot was the bullseye. I felt the sliver slide out. Father said, Wow, that's a beauty even for you, dar dwat. That was what he called me when he didn't feel like saying darling daughter Deza all the way out. Jimmy's plan was to trick Dolly Peaches into standing by a haystack where my crazy brother had emptied two big boxes of needles, which Jimmy spelled nittles. Then I'd walk to the haystack until I was close enough for the needles to shoot out at my big toe. They'd come so fast and hard that Dolly would be run through by 100 needles and would drop dead. I said, I get most of it, but why is it raining in one spot? Jimmy said, Pa told me about this thing called lockjaw or tendinous. It's where if you step on something rusty, you might think you're okay once the wound heals up, but you aren't. The rust puts a bunch of germs in you and they come out later and make it so your jaw gets locked shut. Then you starve to death. So it's raining to the needles. So the needles will get rusty. Then, once they go through Dolly Peaches, they will kill him in a couple of weeks when the lockjaw germs get strong. I gave the drawing back to him. If you studied as hard as you plot murders, you get all A's. Sure, sis. What's the bag? Goose? I showed him my dress and shoes. Wow, are you going to show Ma? Of course I am. Jimmy said, Hold on, Deza. I wish I could rewrite my essay about my family, because there's a trait that Jimmy has that's even more annoying than his Napoleon complex. It's when he imitates Father. He always pretends he's smoking a pipe, even though Father has a little asthma and has never smoked anything. But Jimmy's voice and acting are a whole lot like Father's. Jimmy pointed the invisible pipe at me and said, Let's look at this clearly. He crossed his legs and looked off over my shoulder, something Father does when he's thinking hard about what he's going to say. You've already fallen in love with this dress and these shoes, right? I do like them an awful lot. Jimmy/Father put the invisible pipe back in his mouth and nodded. Well, say that's close enough to love to be worried. So we have to look at the cons or quenches or what you want to do. Let's say you show 'em to your mother and she decides you have to give 'em back. What then? You've lost your new clothes just like that. He snapped his fingers. I hadn't thought of that. Jimmy uncrossed his legs, leaned forward, and flicked ashes from his pipe onto the floor. He's such a good actor that I almost yelled at him for messing up the floor that I'd swept. He waved the pipe in front of himself. My suggestion, darling daughter Deza, is to decide which of the two things you like the most and show Mother the other one. That way, if she says take it back, you only lost one and can sneak around with the other. Thank you, Jimmy, or Father, whoever you are. That sounds like a good idea. Not really, but that is the kind of thing to say to someone who's a great singer, a good imitator, and full of more baloney than Mr. Schwartz's butcher shop. I sat on my bed upstairs. I'd spread the dress next to me and set the shoes on the floor. They were so beautiful. I wish I hadn't told Jimmy. Before I'd talk to him, I'd thought I'd just run into my room, secretly put the clothes on, and show Mother my special new dress and the magic clickety clackety shoes. Mother would say something like, "Oh, Deza, you are so beautiful." If Jimmy wasn't around, she'd even say, "And look how tall you are in those new shoes." As I smoothed my fingers over the dress, I started having worries. Maybe I should show her only my shoes. No, maybe only my dress. My other brain said he's right, kiddo. And just like that, I did know. If the bad brain was agreeing with him, then Jimmy was wrong. I gave myself a good soapy wash and smoothed my hair back with a little Vaseline. I put baking soda in my palm and brushed my teeth. I rubbed some more of the Vaseline into my legs and arms till they were nice and shiny. I put on the new slip, the socks, and shoes. Then, being extra careful not to get any Vaseline on it, I slid the most beautiful piece of blue gingham clothes ever made over my head. The mirror in the bathroom is really tiny, so I reached up on my tiptoes, pulled it off the nail above the wash basin, and moved it up and down so I could see every part of me. The dress was gorgeous. I walked back to my room on my tiptoes so the shoes wouldn't click clack and ruin my surprise. I picked up Great Expectations, sat on the bed, smoothed my dress, crossed my ankles, and started reading. I hadn't read 5 pages when I heard the screen door open downstairs, and Mother said, "Hello, James. How was school?" My heart beat so loud I didn't hear Jimmy answer. I opened my door and clacked down the steps. Mother said, "What is that sound?" I stepped into the living room. Mother stumbled back till her legs hit the couch and she crashed down on it. One of the paper sacks she'd been carrying split open. A big loaf of cheese and a box of powdered milk bounced off the couch. Her hand covered her mouth and she said, "Deza, turn around." And I knew by the happy look on her face that she wasn't going to take my new clothes away. I spun until my dress blossomed and became a beautiful blue and white rose. Jimmy started clapping and whistling. I finally fell on the couch next to Mother. I told her how Mrs. Needham said she'd been waiting 1,000 years for me to be her student and how she was going to tutor me next year. Mother said I'm not the least bit surprised. Your father and I always tell both of you how talented you are. It feels like Christmas in July when someone else agrees, especially someone as wise as Mrs. Needham. I told her about Mrs. Needham's niece and the clothes. "Can I keep them?" Mother said, "Stand up again." I stood up, and something about the dress and shoes made me go right back into a spin. Mother laughed. "Deza Malone, that dress and those shoes were meant for you. The only time you've looked more beautiful was when they handed you to me on the day you were born. Help me get these groceries into the kitchen, then we'll both start working on our thank you notes to that wonderful woman." As I picked up the welfare food, Jimmy said, "You lucked up." I slapped his head. "No, Jimmy Malone, the truth is always the best way." He said, "Not in real life, Deza. Let's be truthful and admit it. You just lucked up. I gotta tell you, though, Ma was right. That get-up was made for you. You're one sharp bit of calico." Me, the cheese, the milk, and the ruined paper sack twirled into the kitchen. I couldn't wait for Father to get home. Even if he hadn't found work, the dress would cheer up the saddest person in the world.